Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for former Kiss guitarist Ace Frehley and his new studio album 10,000 Volts, just released on February 23rd of 2024. This is his 10th solo album if you take into account the 1978 Kiss solo albums that the whole band did at that time. I'm going to do a full rundown, breakdown, and unboxing of this album. We'll get into that in just a bit, but before we start, if you're new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, if you turn on notifications, you're gonna stay up to date on everything going on in the world of music, just like this with a review for the brand new Ace Frehley 10,000 Volts studio album. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background here, a little bit of history on Ace. Of course, if you're a big fan of Kiss like me, then you might already know this stuff. But the points I'm going to talk about will tie into later on when I'm getting into the rundown and the breakdown of the solo album itself. So, beginning his career in 1973, we got original lead guitarist of Kiss, Ace Frehley. He spends 10 years with the band and 10 albums until 1982 before he decides to leave the band. Of course, we now know at this point that Ace didn't play a lot on those later era albums when he was still a member of the band. Now, after leaving Kiss, Ace formed Frehley's Comet. He would release 2 studio albums with them, Frehley's Comet 1987, and which is of course self-titled, and Second Sighting in 1988. And at that point, he decided to focus strictly on a solo career. And so in 1989, he releases Trouble Walkin'. And at that point, interrupts his solo career to rejoin Kiss for their reunion for 5 years from 96 until 2001, which at that point, of course, we all thought was the final farewell tour of Kiss, and then they would go on for another 23 years at that point. Big surprise, really. Then, of course, he resumes his solo career, but he doesn't release a solo album until 2009 with Anomaly. And every few years after that point, he's been very steady releasing albums, including 2 covers albums, Origins Volume 1 in 2016 and Origin Volume 2 in 2020, which was his last studio album, bringing us up to this one, the 10th, 10,000 Volts. So here we are. Let's talk about this one. Let's break it down now. It's his first album of new original music in 6 years since Spaceman in 2018, which was a phenomenal album, a very classic sounding Ace Frehley or Kiss sounding album. This one, the new one, 10,000 Volts, is produced by none other than Steve Brown of Trixter and Tokyo Motor Fist fame. He also co-writes and plays on the album. What's interesting is we also have Steve's Trixter bandmate, PJ Farley, coming in and playing on bass as well on a number of the tracks. The album, mixed by Bruno Ravel of Danger Danger fame. And so, for the most part, it sounds like we've really lined something up here on this album between who's playing, who's co-writing, who's producing. And I will preference this by saying this is a really good sounding album, but it doesn't sound like an Ace Frehley album. Steve Brown's involvement in this, I think, has really changed the overall feeling and song structure of things, which at times I don't think is really right for Ace's vocal style. He's never had the best vocals, although an interesting sound at that and instantly recognizable, but not necessarily somebody who normally, in terms of the Trixter sound, the Danger Danger, or Tokyo Motor Fist, or that sort of stuff, that really has outstanding, amazing vocalists doing that sort of melodic rock stuff, very different than we have with Ace Frehley's vocal styles on this. The album, I think, actually has more in common with Steve's band like Tokyo Motor Fist than a Kiss-sounding album. The album is a lot like Tesla's Shock. If you know that album, then it was co-written and produced by Def Leppard guitarist Phil Collen. And so the album had much more to do with the Def Leppard sound, the layered effect, the heavy production, all of that, than what we normally know Tesla for. This album here is a lot like that. It's got Ace singing it. We know it's an Ace album, but it really doesn't sound like an Ace album because of the song structure and the production that is done to it. Again, though, I stress that this isn't a bad album. It's not that I don't like the album. It is just very different. It's heavily produced. It's definitely got the rock stylings of what we would expect, from Steve Brown on it. It's more melodic rock in that vein than a typical sort of Ace Frehley sounding song, a Kiss sounding song. So for me, at least, it's not until track 6 on this album, Fighting for Life, that we really hear something that's in the vein of the past work that Ace has done. My opinion, the 3 weakest songs are actually the opening songs on the album, the ones that have actually become videos for this 10,000 Volts, Walking on the Moon, both of those getting music videos, and the third one being Cosmic Heart. They're not bad, they're just the weakest songs on the album itself. So what I found, though, is that the album really picks up around tracks 6 through 11. That's where I think it is. And so in typical fashion, though, there is an instrumental song at the end called Stratosphere, putting the stamp on it that is the Ace Frehley thing. Let's talk about the songs, though, because that's sort of the real key in this. I mentioned it doesn't really pick up till track 6, but track number 4, Cherry Medicine, is a really good standout song. It's one of the first ones that caught my ear. It's got a lot of energy in it. It's got expert, production and harmonies, making it very catchy. But again, therein lies the typical thing that doesn't make this sound like an Ace Frehley album. Track number 5, Back in My Arms Again. This thing is the closest to maybe a ballad on the album. There really aren't any on here, but we kind of get into that territory here. When I first heard it, I actually thought it sounded so different that this was the cover song, because Ace always has a cover song on his albums. He's known for doing that, putting his own spin on it. But in fact, this is actually an original song. So it's not something that he just put a spin to. It's actually, something that they wrote. Good song, but like I said, doesn't sound like Kiss or Ace Frehley in that regard. Track 6, I mentioned this, Fighting for Life being one of the ones that is sort of the first real sounding typical Ace song on here. It's a nice hard rocking song that kicks off from the get-go. The vocal style on it is typical to what we would expect from previous Ace albums. The whole album had been more in this vein. I think I'd be doing a different review here, but this is an example where Ace and Steve blended together perfectly, making a song that both sounds like Ace, but we can also hear the influence of Steve. Whereas I think on a lot of the other songs, Steve overpowers Ace. And I don't mean that to sound negative. I know that's not intentional. I'm sure they went down this road knowingly of what it was going to do, but this is what has happened with the album. This song in particular, like I said, it sounds new and fresh. It sounds like an Ace song that's new and fresh, as opposed to being something that is completely different than Ace. Track number 9, Life of a Stranger. So as I mentioned, every Ace Frehley album has at least one cover song. This is that cover song on here. And he's always very adept at putting his own spin, giving his own interpretation of something, and especially songs that you wouldn't always expect him to do. This one here, case in point, because he's covering a song that was a pop song released in 2001 from the movie The Transporter. Not something that would typically be done by Ace, but he makes it his own song, and it sounds very good here. And track number 10, Up in the Sky. Behind track 6, Fighting for Life, the other one that I said I think sounded, the most like an Ace Frehley song. This is another one here that I think could easily have gone on with any of his past work. Again, it's a great melding of Ace's and Steve's styles, but Ace's personality still reigns through on this song. All right, so let's take a look at this album. You guys already saw it's a jewel case. I love jewel cases so much more than digipacks, so very happy with that. Ace kind of alternates between doing that on albums, it seems like. I love the album art here. We got spaceships tying into the whole Space Ace thing. We got 10,000 Volts tying into the Shock Me thing. So a lot of cool Kiss tie-overs there from Ace, former Kiss guitar player. Backside of it, cool artwork again. We got the songs written out and stacked there, and then we open this up. That's where we get some cool art on the CD. When we pop out the disc itself, We get a whole bunch of in the studio behind the scenes stuff. I like this photo here. Steve Brown, PJ Farley, both of Trixter with Ace Frehley. Very cool. And then we've got the artwork. Let me pull this out here. Again, front cover. And when it opens up, this thing unfolds. We get a poster. There we go. A little bit different than the album art cover, which is nice, not to just repeat it there. And then on the back side, it is all the song lyrics and writing credits and stuff like that, who plays on what song and so forth. So there's the artwork and everything with it. Bottom line on this album, as I said earlier, this is a good album. Don't get me wrong, just because I'm saying it doesn't sound like an Ace Frehley album, that it's not a good album, but you do have to go into it sort of letting go of the baggage that you might expect when thinking you want a Kiss or Ace Frehley album. Still lots to love about this, though. It's really, in my opinion, I'm looking at this as a collaborative album between Ace and Steve Brown. I kind of wish they had put both their names on it, but I get it. Ace is a much bigger name than Steve Brown is. My complaint, though, in that it doesn't sound like an Ace album, that it feels more like a Steve Brown album, as I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I love Tokyo Motor Fist. I love Trixter. I like what Steve Brown does. So as I said, that's not a bad thing here. It's just that I want to preference this because if you're kind of like me, who, when you've heard the first song on this and were expecting it to sound like an Ace Frehley album, we didn't really get that there. It's well written. It is well produced, expertly played music that's on here. So all in all, very good. Just took me a few listens to get into, as I said, to let those expectations fall away. But now, I have to say, it's a really good rock album from two of rock's greatest players out there. So I do recommend checking out this album, see if it hits the right notes for you the way it is doing for me now after a few listens. All right, everyone. So there you go. Brand new Ace Frehley 10,000 Volts album reviewed for you guys. Curious to know what your thoughts and opinions are of this album. Do you like it? Do you think it sounds like an Ace album? Do you think it sounds more like a collaborative album or something else, something different the way that I'm hearing it? As I know, we all hear things differently. Our minds take them in and interpret them in different ways. I'm sure this album here is no different. All right, everyone, take care. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.